Morning. The committee will come to order. This morning, the committee holds an open hearing during which members of the House of Representatives are invited to bring their concerns and issues regarding the future posture and force structure of the Department of Defense directly to our attention. My ranking member and I are here today to take testimony from our colleagues in an effort to provide maximum member participation as we work to draft the Department of Defense Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2017. This time I'd like to recognize my ranking member, Mr. Vikoski, for any statement he'd like to make.
Mr. Chairman, I do. One, I deeply apologize to you, staff, the members for being tardy. This was being completely stupid this morning. I don't have a coat, wallet, other things, so I won't delay any further, except everybody's time is important to them. I apologize. I do thank you for holding this hearing, because it is important to the business of this country to hear from our colleagues and the concerns they have about programs, problems, issues in their district. So I'm delighted to be here. And again, appreciate you holding the hearing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vikoski. One of those colleagues, the first one we'll welcome today is David Valadeo from California, and we'll proceed in order, but we thank Mr. Bose for being here ahead of you.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member. Appreciate the opportunity. I am proud to be here to testifying before you on behalf of California's 21st Congressional District, and in particular the Navy warfighters who are stationed at Naval Air Station Lemoore, which I am fortunate enough to represent. As you may know, NAS Lemoore is the West Coast home basing for the Navy's most important tactical aviation, with more than 40 aviation tenants, including the Strike Fighter Wing Pacific, the Strike Fighter Weapons School Pacific, and NAS Lemoore is critical to operations in the Asia-Pacific region. NAS Lemoore will soon be home to yet another squadron of F-18 Hornets, and next year they will begin to receive F-35C aircraft, becoming one of the first air stations in the Navy to do so. During my time here in Congress, I've been honored to meet the men and women who serve at Lemoore and work with them on making sure they have the tools and resources necessary to be the most effective warfighters in the armed services. They serve their country with honor and distinction, and I am committed to ensuring their missions are met with success. I am testifying today to discuss the importance of the aircraft in which these men and women fly and maintain. Last summer, I embarked aboard the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, and while I was aboard, I was able to witness the incredible aircraft the pilots stationed at Lemoore fly on a daily basis in support of our critical operations in the Asia-Pacific region. The lifeblood of the Navy's air fleet is the F-18 EF Super Hornet, and these aircraft will soon be joined by the fifth-generation F-35C aircraft. When they are not stationed at NAS Lemoore, the Super Hornets are the premier strike fighters for the U.S. aircraft carriers deployed throughout the world, whether it is against ISIS or the next conflict to arise suddenly. The F-18s are the first aircraft on site ready to execute the mission until they can be supported by other forces. Unfortunately, the fiscal year 2017 budget does not add sufficient number of Super Hornets to meet the Navy's demands. The Navy faces tactical aviation shortfall of roughly 36 Super Hornets. This shortfall results from incredibly high utilization rates fighting our enemies. Before this subcommittee, the Secretary of Navy testified that his top unfunded requirement is the 14 additional Super Hornets to help address this shortfall. These aircraft will not only address the near demand, but they will also help fill the manufacturing gap until next year when the Navy plans to buy 14 more Super Hornets. There is no greater responsibility in Congress than to provide resources for our national defense. The subcommittee is always thoughtful about the decisions it makes, even in these times of fiscal austerity. We must ensure that our men and women in uniform receive the training and equipment they need to defend the freedoms we as Americans enjoy every day. I asked this subcommittee to consider the Navy's top unfunded requirement of 14 additional Super Hornet aircraft. It will make a difference at NAS Lemoore and for the warfighter. As our nation continues to pivot to Asia, it is important that we maintain superior air power. I am proud that the Navy announced in 2014 that after carefully weighing the strategic, operational, and environmental consequences, that the Navy will base the F-35C aircraft at NAS Lemoore. I've been working with the men and women at NAS Lemoore as they prepare the air station for the arrival of the aircraft. We have been working on military construction projects that include expanded aircraft hangars, maintenance facilities, as well as the elite training facilities to get our pilots up to speed on the flying F-35C. This is an exciting time for the people of California's 21st Congressional District and those stationed at the base. The F-35 program will serve as the 5th generation multi-role fighter for the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Marine Corps, and 8 allied partners, and currently 3 foreign military sales countries. It will allow our services and the services of our allied partners to recapitalize a rapidly aging fleet and next generation capability. For the Navy, the F-35 will be a critical provider of information to the carrier strike group, providing superior situation awareness to both aircraft and ships in the strike group. Studies show that when you add the F-35C to the carrier air wing, the air wing is more lethal. NAS Lemoore will be the West Coast home for a total of 100 F-35C aircraft. It will host 7 Navy Pacific Fleet squadrons, 10 aircraft per squadron, and the Fleet Replacement Squadron, 30 aircraft, beginning in 2016. They'll receive their full complement of F-35C's aircraft by 2028. These F-35 aircraft will be the first 5th generation aircraft flown by the Navy and critical for the Navy to survive flying in an advanced threat environment. These multi-role aircraft will integrate with the F-18 Super Hornet aircraft that operate in NAS Lemoore today. The basing of the F-35C fleet is estimated to require 751 new military and contractor personnel for mission support, with an estimated $35.5 million cost in annual payroll. This will inject much-needed economic stimulus into our suffering region, and basing the F-35C at NAS Lemoore will further result in an increase of about 68,400 operations per year in NAS Lemoore. The home basing for the F-35 aircraft will make NAS Lemoore a significant source of the Navy's strike power in the Pacific and enable our region to play a significant role in our nation's defense for years to come. The Navy has had to make tough choices in deferring buying F-35 aircraft in the numbers it should in order to accelerate modernization of its tactical aviation fleet. But given the current geopolitical and international state of affairs, investing in 5th generation is not a luxury, but a necessity. The fiscal year 2017 budget includes $10.5 billion for the F-35 program, and yet the services have still identified a number of unfunded requirements to include 4 F-35As for the U.S. Air Force, 2 F-35Cs for the Navy, and 2 F-35Bs and 2 F-35Cs for the U.S. Marine Corps. I would urge the committee fully fund this program to support the unfunded requirements. The F-35C will be critical to ensuring that when operating in a contested airspace, our men and women can return home. The importance and value of NAS Lemoore to California's 21st District and to the Central Valley cannot be questioned. The economic impact of the air station is estimated at close to $1 billion, and our local businesses and industries are proud to work hand in hand with NAS Lemoore. As I have stated before, it is an honor to be able to testify before you today and represent the men and women at NAS Lemoore and make sure that they are provided the resources necessary to be effective warfighters. Supporting both the F-18 and F-35 programs is vital to ensuring our Navy does not experience a shortfall. Our nation continues its fight against ISIS as well as the growing number of diverse threats we face. We must do all we can to maintain superiority of the air, and we cannot afford to lose this priority. I urge the committee to fully fund both programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for being here on behalf of NAS Lemoore and obviously more Super Hornets and F-35s coming your way. Thank you for being a strong supporter of national security.
Mr. Chairman, just to add, I think our next witness is going to talk about Operation Tempos, and one of the things that we're very concerned about is not only the acquisition of those aircrafts, but to make sure we have the pilots to fly them, we have the monies to maintain them, and for operations. So I do appreciate your concern and your testimony very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We're pleased to welcome Congressman Mike Bose from Illinois, a Marine veteran. Thank you for being here bright and early, and I apologize for not recognizing you first, even though Mr. Valadez offered to give you his slot. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member, for allowing me to testify today. My comments will be brief. First, I'd like to discuss the Navy's need for the F-A-18 Super Hornet strike fighters. The F-18 is currently the only operational strike fighter of the United States Navy. The aircraft is conducting daily combat missions in support of operations against ISIS and all other Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist groups in the Middle East. However, the pace of operations is significantly wearing out existing aircraft. While Congress funded the acquisition of 12 aircraft, or 14 aircraft, this number may still be short of what the U.S. Navy needs. The procurement of 14 additional F-18 Super Hornets will help avoid the operational shortfall and keep the St. Louis production line open pending aircraft sales to allied nations. Therefore, I request that the committee fund the United States Navy's request for 14 aircraft for the upcoming fiscal year. In addition, aircraft and other weapon systems need ammunition to take the fight to the enemy. The General Dynamic plant in Marion, Illinois, manufactures a variety of medium caliber rounds used in weapon systems by all four services. Many of these munitions are highly advanced and represent the next generation of force projection and force protection technology. Examples include the 30 millimeter KE ship defense munitions capability of penetrating waves and other obstacles to protect ships from swarming attack small boats, and the 20 millimeter point detonation round capable of penetrating soft targets before detonation. Each of these rounds will help protect our servicemen and women, allowing them to defend and the growing use of asymmetric tactics by our enemies. Therefore, I urge the committee to fully fund the service's medium caliber round request. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak today, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Boss, thank you very much for being with us, and obviously for your own service as a Marine. I know that never stops.
No,
And for supporting the need for aircraft, and most particularly for the focus on ammunition.
thank you.
What we deliver,
Yes,
it's important.
I appreciate you being here on your election day.
that's,
Because of the importance of your task.
it is important.
Yeah.
This is vitally important.
Appreciate it.
National security is the most important thing we do.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Pleased to welcome Congresswoman Martha McSally. Oh, excuse me.
Sally's correct.
Uh,
Sally.
Well, I'm gonna jump out of order here. Excuse me. Pete Aguilar from California. Excuse me. I should have put.
No, there's not an attendance
well-
roster there, so I understand. Thank you, Chairman Freelingson and Ranking Member Visklosky. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I wanted to highlight a few priorities for fiscal year 2017's Defense Appropriation Bill that I humbly ask for your support. The use of big data by DIA, an often forgotten health concern impacting our servicemen and women, possible savings connected to our nation's carriers, and our efforts to confront the ever-growing cyber threat are all critical issues I believe deserve more discussion as we debate the appropriate methods to defending our nation. One of DIA's responsibilities includes creating and maintaining an infrastructure-focused foundational intelligence database to aid our situational awareness and mission planning activities. While it's critical that our foreign infrastructure assessments, database creation, and maintenance is unfortunately quite labor-intensive, leading the DIA to embark on foundational intelligence modernization program in an effort to use big data to our advantage. While this program will focus on crowdsourced big data discovery, commercial database integration, and open source location-based data services to populate the databases, the analytical issues that inevitably come with big data still need to be addressed. Further, the modernization program will not necessarily assist us in efficiently and effectively presenting this data to others within government. After defense and intelligence community users select the relevant data and create analytic models, putting the data in a more understandable format so that it can be disseminated to other decision makers is critical. That's why I support additional funding to create cloud-based, all-source geoanalytics based on a commercial, off-the-shelf technology in support of DIA's new foundational intelligence modernization program. We need to develop tools to analyze changes to critical foreign infrastructure through big data, while also providing an interactive web-based executive briefing tool. These tools will not only help decision makers conceptualize the battle space environment and determine the correct course of action, but will assist our warfighters in taking the fight to the enemy. I will now turn my attention to a military personnel issue that I don't believe receives enough attention. Hearing plays a vital role in the performance of our servicemen and women. And because of the nature of warfare, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are constantly exposed to high levels of noise. I can tell you the number of service members and veterans I've met that suffer from hearing loss and have been wearing hearing aids for years. Unfortunately, unlike civilians, military personnel have little option but to remain in noisy environments in order to complete specific tasks and missions. And even though areas such as military flight lines are prime examples of places that routinely expose our service members to harmful noise, hearing loss is a largely preventable condition. That's why I ask the committee to direct additional funding to accelerate the current research and development efforts of the Naval Noise-Induced Hearing Loss Program. The Navy's efforts should not only assist those exposed to harmful noise on our aircraft carrier flight decks, but also across the services on all flight lines. Doing so will save countless dollars of future medical costs for thousands of personnel and will protect the precious investment that we make in our brave warriors. On a note also related to America's Navy, it's my belief that our aircraft carriers offer us an array of unique capabilities that allow us unparalleled force projection with the ability to marshal assets anytime, anywhere. Whether related to the fight against the Islamic State or a humanitarian mission after a natural disaster, few can argue with the importance of such assets to our effort. Similarly, I believe that that few can argue the impact that research, development, test, and evaluation dollars spent now have on the future of our fleet. Our ability to refine and improve Ford-class carriers designed through the Design for Affordability project will help put downward pressure on the construction costs of future carriers in the Ford class like the USS Enterprise. Because we continue to confront complex global threat environments while also facing the challenge of a fiscally tight budgetary outlook, I request that the committee provide an increase in funding for the Design for Affordability program so that our RDT&E efforts can lead to future savings at the same time that we will be confronting a very expensive modernization wave throughout the armed forces. Finally, issues related to cyber defense in the military as well as in the civilian sphere are directly connected to our most critical infrastructure and overall national security. Given the complex threat posed to federal, state, and private entities within the United States from cyber attacks, investments must be made on a whole-of-government approach. One of these investments should be through funding the activation of the Army National Guard cyber protection teams. Many part-time members of our National Guard have civilian cybersecurity skills and experience from their private jobs. These are invaluable skills that should and must be used to counter this growing threat. These forces would not only offer outreach to states, but it would also bring a suite of robust capabilities to civilian authorities and other entities. We cannot rest until our cyber needs are met, and I ask that the committee take the necessary steps to engage these untapped resources. As this committee continues its efforts to confront the multitude of challenges facing our nation, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you on a few issues that I believe are vitally important. Thank you so much.
Indeed, thank you very much. We appreciate your focusing on a number of issues which are of keen interest to our committee and our committee members as well.
I would just note you get a gold star. I do not believe I've ever had a hearing where someone referenced the noise-induced hearing loss program. And as someone who needs assistance myself, I appreciate you bringing that to the committee's attention very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. McSally, gentlewoman from Arizona, thank you for being with us
Absolutely.
and for your own service in the Air Force. Remarkable.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. We'll submit a written statement. I'm just going to speak verbally on some of our priorities. I proudly represent Arizona's 2nd Congressional District, which include national security treasures of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and Fort Huachuca. We also are the home to Raytheon Missile Systems, a key partner for us and the warfighter. As you know, I'm a former A-10 pilot and squadron commander myself. One of our highest priorities, and I want to thank the committee for our support in the past, is to keep the A-10 flying until we have a tested, proven replacement. I appreciate the support of this committee in the past. The administration has decided to not tilt at windmills again this year. to put any more A-10s in the boneyard, but I'm still concerned about the future and the way ahead. We've got now 9 A-10 squadrons remaining across the active duty Guard and Reserve, and they're smaller than the squadrons they had in the past. Some of them, like the one I commanded, has gone from 24 airplanes down to 18 airplanes. They're currently in 3 locations, right in the DMZ in South Korea, providing key anti-armor capability. They're deployed and kicking butt in the fight against ISIS, and they're also deployed to Europe to train and reassure our allies amidst Russian aggression. So in 3 separate locations with COCON's asking for them and only 9 squadrons remaining, it's our my view, that we need to not put one more A-10 in the boneyard, and we need to continue to invest in it to make sure it can fly until we have a tested, proven replacement. So I humbly ask the committee to fully fund the operations and maintenance for all the A-10s that are still remaining, which are 283. Also, we're asking that you invest in the critical wing rebuilding that is important to allow the A-10 to continue to fly its missions into the future. We finally have gotten the Pentagon to agree to have a side-by-side F-35 and A-10 fly-off and testing to address the close air support capabilities and address whether there'll be a decrease in capability with the F-35. Now, let me say for the record, we need a 5th-generation fighter. We need it fast. We need the F-35. I'm a strong F-35 supporter. But when it comes to the unique capabilities the A-10 brings to the fight, in its loiter time, its lethality, its maneuverability, and its survivability, there is no other asset in our inventory that brings those unique capabilities to the fight that literally will keep Americans alive in unique circumstances. And until we're sure its replacement is going to not increase risk to our troops, we shouldn't be putting any A-10s in the boneyard. They are going to have that fly-off. The earliest is going to be FY18. We may be getting an independent report to Congress, FY19 or FY20. And then we may discover at the end of that the F-35 is not the best replacement for some of these unique capabilities. So we need to keep the A-10 flying, and we need to invest in these wing rebuilding investments so that it can continue to fly. Additionally, there's the radio upgrades that are critical for the combat search and rescue mission. A lot of people focus on close air support, but they don't realize if we have a downed airman, the A-10 is the only capability that shows up to be the rescue mission commander. We locate, communicate with, protect, and run the entire search and rescue mission. This is a capability that ensures that our troops and our airmen, if they have to eject, that they don't have the same fate as a Jordanian pilot who was lit on fire in a cage. This is such a strategic importance, so keeping that A-10 and the LARS and the radio capability for that search and rescue is also important. We have a 3-pronged approach in the NDAA, and I just share that with you. One is keep the current A-10 flying because it's what we need, and invest in its wings and its radio so they can keep fighting in the fight that it's expected to be in for the next several years. We'll be patient to see what the outcome of is this fly-off, but we want the decision to be conditional based. We don't want any decisions on what's going to replace the A-10 until after this testing is over. So that's our second approach, so condition-based instead of time-based. And then the third one is we're asking the Pentagon to start the conversation about investing in an AX, potentially, in parallel. Don't wait until the outcome of the fly-off. Have an honest discussion about what the follow-on to the A-10 might be, a light attack aircraft, and that needs to include also looking at what we could do to the A-10 to make that be a cheaper, faster AX, to include the re-engining of the A-10. So these are some of the discussions we're having with the Air Force. This is the approach we're going to have in the NDAA, and I humbly request the support of this committee moving forward for these 3 approaches to the A-10. A couple of issues I want to bring up in addition to the A-10 related to our missile capability. One is the Tomahawk missile. Look, I've run time-sensitive targeting in my time in the military. Oftentimes, things pop up around the world where we immediately need to get involved and hit targets, and the Tomahawk is one of our first weapons of choice to do that. We've seen it in the fight against ISIS, how critical it is. The inventory is getting low. The minimum sustainment rate is 196, and the President's budget is only for 100. So again, humbly request a plus-up of $76 million to procure the 196 missiles to keep the missile, to keep that line at minimum sustainment rate. Additionally, Standard Missile 3 is another important one. I ask for robust funding for our missile defense to include Standard Missile 3 because we see the threats with North Korea and Iran and other rogue actors. Obviously, defending our nation, our interests, and our allies and our troops is very important, and so I appreciate the support on that. And finally, on the missiles issue is the JAGM, the Joint Air-to-Ground Missile, which is a future Army capability, and we just request the President's budget fully funded for the JAGM. In closing, about Fort Huachuca, we've got a national security treasure down in Fort Huachuca, asymmetrical assets to include intelligence, unmanned aerial vehicles, electronic jamming, we've noticed electronic warfare. All the service chiefs, all the combatant commanders, the future commissioner in the Army, they've all identified EW as a critical gap in our capabilities. So I would ask for, full, robust funding for our research and development and our current EW capabilities. The EC-130 is one that's absolutely critical. We got to keep that flying until we have a replacement. And we've got a national treasure of an electronic testing range down at Fort Huachuca to test those capabilities. So just that critical gap in EW is important for our nation, important for the warfighter, and we've got the capability to test whatever you fund. And then finally, unmanned aerial systems. I've worked with them in many different capacities, both in the Army and the Air Force. I think we need to continue to have a strong investment in research, development, and operational capability for unmanned aerial systems. I appreciate the hard work of this committee. I know you have difficult decisions to make, and I'm ready to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for your strong advocacy and obviously your deep knowledge of a lot of what you've been talking about. And may I say, Pete Defiskovsky and I, the ranking member, and I work pretty closely with Chairman Thornberry to make sure that there's
Great.
no gaps here. We'll do our level best to address all of those issues.
Fantastic.
And certainly on the A-10, there's been nobody stronger in terms of its letting us know of its capabilities and it's the need that our nation has right now for its use.
Exactly.
Mr. Defiskovsky?
No, thank you very much for your testimony.
Oh, great.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Pleased to welcome Congressman Bradley Byrne from Alabama. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate being with you, Mr. Visklosky. This is my third year.
Thank you, as was Ms. McSally and others before us. Thank you for being here.
Well,
Again,
I appreciate it. And I've been with you, this is my third time, to talk about two very important ships for the United States Navy, the Littoral Combat Ship and what's now called the Expeditionary Fast Transport Vessel, which used to be the Joint High-Speed Vessel. I get confused when they change the name, so I want to remind you what they were. This committee has been very supportive of these two programs in the past. And before I go any further, let me thank you for your past support. It's very important. This program, as you will recall from the very beginning, going back to the Clinton administration when this was first conceived, was put together as a 52-ship buy between two shipyards, one in Mobile, Alabama, where I'm from, and the other in Marinette, Wisconsin, Congressman Ribble's district. The Navy liked having two shipyards. The shipyards like having the competition, believe it or not, and what we've gotten out of are two excellent vessels at an incredibly good price, with the price coming down. Under the directive of Secretary Carter, as codified in the release of the President's fiscal year 2017 budget, they're now taking actions to decrease the number of yard in fiscal year 2019. Now, this is an unusual circumstance where that's the Secretary of Defense's position, but that's not the Secretary of the Navy's position. Secretary of the Navy publicly disagrees with Secretary of Defense about this. The sudden and unexpected reduction from 52 to 40 ships proposed by the administration will increase the cost of the ships. The Congressional Budget Office says it will increase the cost of each ship by 20%. We've questioned the Navy about this in HASC hearings, and they agree with that assessment. By taking this step, the Navy will actually be causing the cost of ships to increase at the precise moment they're moving into serial production, the point at which they will actually begin to see return on the investment that we've made, this committee's made, Congress has made, years past. This committee will remember that 2 years ago, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, a prior Secretary of Defense, paused the program for 9 months to allow the Navy to conduct an in-depth analysis of the requirements to implement the Secretary of Defense directive to increase both the lethality and the survivability of the LCS as it transitioned to the frigate. This analysis revalidated the need for 52 ships and maintained the dual supplier strategy with both Austal USA and Mobile and the Marinette Marine in Marinette, Wisconsin. This plan both met the Navy's requirement for 52 ships, reduce costs through competition, and ensure the stability of the industrial base of both shipyards. And I know this committee is well aware of the importance of industrial base. As you likely know, the Department of Defense and Navy have been publicly at odds about the future of these programs. The need for these ships was highlighted just last month at an Armed Services Committee hearing where Undersecretary Stackley, the head of the U.S. Naval Acquisition, stated the requirement for the vessels remains at 52. So the Navy continues to say they need 52. He also stated that there was no Navy analysis indicating anything but a 52-ship requirement would meet the Navy's needs. Any reduction, this is his words, would create gaps in our small service combatants that are an important tool for operational commanders. Now, this is an important component for the entire fleet, but it's critical to support the Pentagon's pivot to the Asia-Pacific region. The LCS has proven its utility in the region by routinely accessing places other larger ships simply can't get into. That's why these are called littoral combat ships. Just last month, in testimony before the Armed Services Committee, Admiral Harris, the PACOM commander, called the LCS, quote, a terrific platform to work with our allies and partners in that region, close quote. The Secretary of the Navy, as I said earlier, is repeatedly outlining his strong support for the program and the need for 52 ships. The LCS has adhered to strict contractual and budgetary constraints and has locked into fixed price contracts at a congressionally mandated cost cap. The LCS program has seen cost decreases over time, and ships today are being built at a total appropriation cost of $475 million per hull, well under the cost cap. By the way, both states and both shipyards invested in these shipyards to meet that cost. Clear that delaying production of the LCS would significantly reduce the size of our fleet and damage Americans' national security. In turn, this would force the Navy to cover the same geographic area with significantly fewer assets, which they say they just simply can't do. Because of these considerations, I asked the subcommittee to support the funding necessary to procure 3 littoral combat ships in this next year's budget. Now, let me briefly address the Joint High-Speed Vessel. This ship is a shallow draft, high-speed catamaran used for the intra-theater support of personnel, equipment, and supplies. I personally talked to combatant commanders as well as the Marine Corps about this ship, and they've all stressed it's important. The vessel is a Swiss Army knife, if you will. It's able to support a wide range of missions for all the services. It can be a troop transport, it can conduct humanitarian disaster missions, and it can even be used as a hospital ship. Since delivery of the first vessel, these ships have supported a wide range of operations around the globe, including assisting in recovery operations after the Indian earthquake and tsunami in 2004 and the Japanese earthquake and tsunami in 2011. As we're meeting here today, the USNS Spearhead is completing their 3rd deployment in the 6th Fleet Area of Responsibility to support operations in EUCOM and AFRICOM. Clearly, these vessels are effectively filling a critical gap. The USNS Spearhead recently supported a successful anti-piracy operation. Other EPFs are currently deployed to PACOM and CENTCOM, providing support and operational tasking for the respective fleet commanders. Of note, these ships are being outfitted with different capabilities to support the different needs of each of these areas. Unfortunately, the President's budget fails to recognize this fact, and the EPF meets so many of our Navy's operational needs. The stated requirement for the number of these ships is 18, but to this point, 6 have been delivered, and only another 6 are under contract, so we got a gap of another 6. The acquisition of one of these ships in fiscal year 2017 will continue to meet service demands and keep the cost per vessel down. We are benefiting from the efficiencies gained through the construction of the initial 6 ships. In order to ensure the capability to build these ships and maintain such an affordable price, we need to keep the production line open. Unfortunately, without further procurement in fiscal year 2017, this line will close. In closing, I want to emphasize how important it is we support our nation's Navy as a whole. I come here every year to talk to you about 2 ships, but I don't want you to think I just support 2 ships. It's the whole fleet that we need to be talking about. I know that you care about the whole fleet. This is an incredibly challenging time with such a wide range of challenges everywhere around the world. It would be irresponsible, in my judgment, to halt investment in our nation's Navy capabilities and resources at this point in time. Mr. Chairman, I know you understand the vital importance of the Navy's fleet, as you do, Ranking Member, and the need to get our ship total numbers back up to the level required in order to protect our nation and keep our sea lanes free and open, particularly in the face of what China is attempting to do in the South China Sea. In order to do that, we must have the strong, reliable, well-trained industrial base to construct and maintain the fleet. Whether it's the over 4,000 men and women that work at Austell Shipyard in my district, or the thousands of people who work just across the state line in Mississippi at the Huntington Ingalls Shipyard, we must maintain our workforce that we've worked so hard to cultivate on our Gulf Coast. Thank you so very much for your time today and for your support for these programs. I thank you for your continued support for our Navy. I'd be happy to answer any
Mr. Byrne,
questions.
thank you for being here once again, strongly supporting our Navy. We don't have enough ships, and certainly the ones we have need to all these special capabilities, and thank you for emphasizing that point each and every year. We work very closely, as you know, with the Armed Services Committee. We'll try to get those numbers up and meet those requirements, considering what's happening around the world.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate your being here, your strong support. Mr. Fiskowski?
Also appreciate the emphasis on the industrial base, and not only for the larger contractors, but the smaller, and one of the concerns we have as a committee is that predictability of that workflow, so appreciate you mentioning that very much.
Yes, sir. I didn't mention this. I was the head of workforce development for the state of Alabama, and I know Mississippi did the same thing for their
Who
shipyards.
did it better, Alabama or Mississippi?
I'm not going to get into that. We both did a good job.
You did.
Because we believe that it's important for our states, but also it's important for national security, that we have those trained workers that create the best ships, the best weapon systems in the world. And while those ships are important, it's the people that make them and the people that serve on them that are really important. So I appreciate your saying that.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
we support our industrial base. Thank you very, Congressman Glenn Thompson from Pennsylvania. Welcome. Thanks for your patience. May I just say for the record, testimony, if it's abbreviated, your full testimony, put in the record, but if it's abbreviated, we even appreciate it more.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, Chairman, thank you. Ranking Member, thank you. Thank you for your continued dedication to the House Appropriations Subcommittee and Defense. And I certainly recognize the challenges placed before the subcommittee, but I appreciate your ongoing commitment to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Reserve Forces. As the father of a Purple Heart Army Staff Sergeant and vocal supporter of our nation's defense programs, I'm grateful and honored for the opportunity to share some FY17 priorities. Despite the military drawdown, our nation continues to recruit volunteers to join the ranks and regenerate our armed forces. Now, while our military entrance processing stations do a great job examining the physical health of incoming recruits, experts have acknowledged an information gap when it comes to mental health or behavioral health. To address this issue, I've advocated for improving military suicide prevention, and by proposing a mental health assessment for all incoming recruits to be used as a baseline for evaluation throughout their careers. And this legislative proposal, known as the Medical Evaluation Parity Service Members, or MEPS Act, did receive bipartisan support and was included in the fiscal year 2016 National Defense Authorization Act. And while the MEPS Act has no negative budgetary impact, CBO has indicated it would require a small increase in appropriations to implement and fulfill. And accordingly, I urge the subcommittee to fund the consolidated health support programs within the Department of Defense at the administrations at adequate levels. And not only is this vastly important to us to properly screen our veterans prior to their service, it's also our shared duty to make life-saving resources accessible to them when they return home. And for this reason, I support the development of new technologies that connect healthcare providers to information, patients, and other providers to provide better care, especially in rural and underserved areas. In light of the recent technological advances involving telemedicine programs and the authority given to the Department of Defense by Congress, I request a strong financial support for both the Medical Information Technology Development Program and the Medical Technology Development Program within DoD's defense health programs. It's undeniable that the DoD has demonstrated their willingness to work hard to improve the lives of military members and civilians alike, and medical research conducted within the DoD has led to life-saving breakthroughs and the development of effective treatments in a myriad of conditions. This next request really has to do with fulfilling the, I think, one of the most important promises we make to the men and women that serve this country. And while we work to assist our servicemen and women who are here with us, we have to keep in mind the more than 80,000 American citizens who served in Vietnam War, Korean War, and World War II who are still missing in action. For those who made the ultimate sacrifice, their families and loved ones deserve no less than our greatest recovery efforts, really fulfilling that promise that we leave no soldier behind. Diligent work, planning, and sufficient funding is necessary in order to continue to provide grieving families with the opportunity for closure. And I respectfully request that the subcommittee support robust funding for the Defense POW MIA office. In tandem with providing adequate support services to all of our servicemen and women, we must also recognize the value of encouraging innovation in the U.S. defense industrial base. The Manufacturing Technology, or ManTech program, is intended to improve productivity and responsiveness of the U.S. defense industrial base by funding the development, optimization, and transition of providing manufacturing technologies to key naval suppliers. Specifically, in Pennsylvania's 5th Congressional District, Penn State's Applied Research Laboratory manages 2 ManTech Centers of Excellence, the Institute for Manufacturing and Sustainment Technology and the Electro-Optics Center. The work accomplished by these partnerships includes basic and applied research and technology demonstrations and the facilitation of technology commercialization. I'd appreciate the committee looking favorably upon these programs. And then finally, an issue that has been of great concern to me and other members of the Pennsylvania's delegation, the expansion of Russia's geopolitical aspirations through their positioning as a regional energy giant. A current case in point is in the development of the Army's new medical center at the Rhine Ordnance Barracks installation area. This hospital, budgeted at nearly $1 billion, is to be the replacement for the aging medical complex in nearby Landau, Germany. Now, in the advanced state of planning, no final decision has been made on the energy source for furnished heat for the medical facility, which will serve U.S. uniformed and civilian personnel based on 3 different continents. Now, I thank the chairman and ranking member for their understanding that domestic energy sources for U.S. energy, for U.S. military installations will ensure that U.S. interests are secured abroad. Now, I have language that will be submitted along with support from the Pennsylvania delegation and other like-minded members who know that we cannot simply leave Russia to be the supplier of energy to U.S. military installations. Failure to address these concerns could leave our servicemen and women serving overseas in a new and a very literal Cold War. And I look forward to working with the committee as the appropriations process moves forward. And once again, thank you for your leadership and your dedication to the men and women who are serving this great nation.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for being here and also for your son's service and recognition, having received the Purple Heart, and your focus on missing in action, that recovery program. And certainly we need to get moving on building a new hospital to replace Landstuhl and a lot of the other issues that relate to R&D that are medical related. We thank you for your strong support of national security. Mr. Wiskoski.
I just make the observation, appreciate you mentioning the suicide program. Committee's worked on a number of these, including with the Department of the Navy, which several years ago had more than 100 programs, and the committee suggested then you don't have a program. Right. And the Navy is doing a much better job today, so I really appreciate you bringing that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congressman Ted Lieu, I apologize to other members. I guess the chairman has the right to call the order, so I apologize to Mr. Cook and others. We got off to a very late start, so if anything you could do to speed us along would be appreciated, and I apologize for bumping others. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman Freeling-Heisen and Ranking Member Wiskoski. I want to thank you for having this hearing, and I'm going to talk about the Navy's tactical aviation shortfall. You're familiar with this issue, but let me just highlight some key facts. Last year, the Chief of Naval Operations testified to Congress that he faced a Super Hornet shortfall of 24 to 36 aircraft. Congress and this committee responded by adding 5 Super Hornets to last year's budget. However, due to increased utilization rates, as well as delays in processing through legacy aircraft through these depots, the shortfall still remains at about 36 aircraft. And then this number grows exponentially as these fighter jets start to age. Right now, we have an operational issue with the shortfall, and then we have a production line issue. Secretary of Navy Ray Mabus testified that he added those aircraft as his top priority, in part for maintaining the F-18 production line as an international sale, for international sales and domestic sales. In my own district, we have the production line that manufactures the fuselage for every single F-18 aircraft in the Navy, and I've seen the 7,000 men and women that help support this, the tremendous economic impact that it has. And if we don't keep this production line open, not only does it affect the economy, it also affects the ability to keep this aircraft from being produced. And as the subcommittee weighs these many factors, I hope you consider both their tactical and operational shortfall and their production line problems. And the Navy really needs 36 Super Hornets, but they can make do with 14. That is their unfunded requirement, And again, I want to thank you for letting members speak and having served active duty and in the reserves. I've seen your committee and how you all have helped our warfighters, and I appreciate that.
Thank you for being here again and for your ongoing service in the Air Force.
Thank you.
Obviously, as a member of Congress and being such a strong supporter of national defense.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bradenstein, apologies for the order, and let me thank you for your Navy service.
Oh, thank you, Chairman.
We're very proud of all of our members, but of course, those who've worn the uniform especially. Thank you.
Chairman Frelinghuysen and Ranking Member Vislavsky, thank you for having me testify before your subcommittee. I want to address 4 issues that are focused on space-related matters. I'm going to go through them one at a time, but I think the overwhelming issue that we need to deal with are the threats that our country faces in space, not only from the Chinese and the Russians, and sophisticated threats, not only direct descent and co-orbital threats, but from the terrestrial sphere. We've got dazzling and jamming and a whole host of other threats that we're facing in space. So the first thing I'd like you to consider is appropriating $10 million in Air Force RDT&E to establish a commercial weather data pilot program. The purpose of a commercial weather data pilot program would be to distribute the architecture that we have in space for weather, and we can actually take advantage of a very robust commercial market. Right now, we've got companies that are launching satellites doing technologies like GPS radio occultation, hyperspectral sensing, capabilities that can feed our numerical weather models and provide us the intelligence and information we need for weather. And we can do this by buying data, changing the business model in essence, and initiating a pilot program where we can buy data from commercial enterprise. The reason this is important, number one, it distributes the architecture, complicates the targeting solution for our enemies, but also we're able to lower the cost for the taxpayer. And how do we do that? Well, when we buy data, those constellations are being launched really to serve markets. The insurance company, reinsurance, the insurance industry, reinsurance industry, markets like transportation, energy, agriculture, and this, if we are but one customer of many, it lowers the cost to the taxpayer. So I think a commercial weather data pilot program should be considered. $10 million in Air Force RDT&E money. Second thing is I think it's important that we have a small venture class launch service program, another pilot program that would enable venture class rockets to take but commercial satellites into space. Again, we've got commercial operators, not just for weather, but also remote sensing and imagery. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency just put out their commercial space policy. And these satellites that commercial operators are launching are much smaller, distributed, disaggregated, and if we had a venture class program that could launch these satellites, it'd be critically valuable for the commercial industry that is providing many of our national security assets. And so what I'm requesting there is $27.6 million in Air Force RDT&E money for a venture class launch service program. Again, when the Chinese have already demonstrated a willingness to shoot down satellites, they shot down one of their own in 2007 and created an orbital debris field that's thousands of pieces. Having the ability to rapidly reconstitute small and disaggregated architectures in space is important. That's what the venture class launch service program would be for. Third, I think the subcommittee should support the Air Force Satellite Communications Pathfinder program. It's a $26 million program. Congresswoman Betty McCollum on this subcommittee has made her efforts very clear, and I support her effort, and that is this. When we think about our space-based communication architecture, we need to take advantage of all the great things that are happening in the commercial sphere, and in this particular case, 80% of the Department of Defense unprotected communications that are utilized by warfighters, 80% is commercial. And we're leasing that capacity on the spot market at the highest, most efficient ways, in the highest cost, most inefficient ways possible. Instead, this is an innovative pathfinder. What it does is it says, we're going to buy hardware. We're going to buy one transponder on a communication satellite, and then we're going to trade that transponder for global access to a constellation of communication satellites in space. And that global access means that our capacity will be portable. We'll be able to get the right information to the warfighter in the right place at the right time, and the warfighter will be able to share information back. So I think the SATCOM Pathfinder program, $26 million is what the President's budget request had in it. I think that's an important provision. Finally, I think we should consider supporting to the tune of $20 million the Air Force request for enterprise ground services. This is an idea that brings architectures together for the ground segment so that we will have more resilient and integrated ground architectures. We're talking about space-based infrared for our missile warning systems, GPS satellites, also our weather satellites, and on top of it, AEHF for protected communications for our national strategic initiatives. So I think the enterprise ground system is an important thing that we should consider funding at $20 million. So in conclusion, I think that this committee can help us adapt to fundamentally new space considerations, things that are happening in a contested and congested environment in space, that we need to take advantage of all the great capabilities that our commercial operators are providing, and of course, do it in the best interest of our warfighter.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. I want to thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for really covering a lot of space-based investments and how important they are to our national security, given what's happening around the world. Thank you very much for your time here. Ms. Wisłowski?
I just appreciate that you have discrete monetary requests.
Oh, sure.
So that we have a mark to work off of. Thank you very much.
You bet, absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Paul Cook, the gentleman from California, I want to apologize. You never keep Marines waiting, but I guess it kept you waiting long enough so you can blast away here. Thank you for your own service for decades in the Marines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Wisłowski. I was getting the feeling that you had a bias for the Air Force over the Marines, but ironically enough, I am presenting testimony on behalf of the Air Force. We've come a long way since my days in the Marine Corps. What I used to do with grease pencils, sheets of plastic, and a paper map, all done digitally nowadays. Compared to the intelligence products I used to work with, today's trooper has access to amazing technology. We can share intelligence and develop targets faster than ever, and our troops can use this information immediately. But we cannot assume that we will always have this advantage. We must keep investing in the tools our intelligence analysts need to give our troops the edge to win on the battlefield. Supporting cutting-edge digital mapping software in the Air Force's geospatial enterprise will provide one of these vital tools. This year, the Air Force requested $10.9 million for combat air intelligence system activities. Within that amount, $4.6 million is requested for a project called Geo-Intelligence Information and Service Software, which provides Air Force personnel support from the software developer to create layered maps that combine multiple sources of intelligence. These maps have broad application within the Air Force, developing good unit-level intelligence, allowing for just-in-time dissemination and targeting, helping commanders make the right decision. This committee knows well the high cost and capability of Air Force aircraft, but mission planning information is equally important. Increasingly sophisticated air defense systems are being developed throughout the Middle East and Europe, as well as the world, and challenge our supremacy in the air. Network mapping data allows our forces to reduce risk to our pilots in combat aircraft. While the Air Force is developing requirements for the next phase of the Air Force Distributed Common Ground System, this mapping software can fill the capability gap right now. This software will have an immediate impact on the capabilities of units like the Air Force Geospatial Production Cell at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or the 55th Wing at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. So I am asking you to closely evaluate the Air Force budget request for this. The committee can provide a generic program funding increase of $5 million from the competitive acquisition of commercial off-the-shelf software to enhance the Air Force's target and intelligence capability. And I'd just like to add that I was surprised that they asked Infantry Marine to present this rather complicated request, because my usual question to the Air Force is, where does the bayonet go on the airplane? But as somebody that has, they look at me and, they said, oh, we got this thing we want you to present. But as somebody that's been in combat, somebody that actually went through that, and how important it is to know that where the enemy is and the intelligence is vital. If you don't know, you're going to make mistakes. Troops are going to die. Bad things are going to happen. So that's part of the reason I presented this. And I told this committee in the past, I believe, don't forget, I was the most dangerous weapon in the world many years ago, before most of the staff, before all the staff was probably born. I was a second lieutenant of the Marine Corps with a map and a compass, and that was a very, very dangerous individual. So hopefully now we have something better, Mr. Chairman.
We do, and thanks to your advocacy and colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Thank you for putting a human face on why this mapping is important.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent job. Thank you very much.
much.
Dave Reichert.
My colleague's been waiting.
Okay. Bill Clay, come on up. Thank you.
So much.
I apologize.
Chairman and ranking member Wisloski for allowing me to.
From the great state of Missouri. How are you?
Missouri.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. You know, the U.S. Navy provides our military with rapid, effective, and highly flexible force protection throughout the world. And the tip of that spear of these forces are the Navy's carrier-based squadrons of tactical warplanes. A key among these aircraft is the FA-18 Super Hornet. And this year, before this subcommittee, the Secretary of the Navy and Chief of Naval Operations testified that there is an urgent need for additional Super Hornets. This year's budget takes steps to help reduce the Navy's tactical aviation gap. 3 squadrons of Super Hornet, but it isn't quite enough to meet the high operational demands of tactical aviation. And that is why the Navy has identified as its #1 unfunded priority adding 14 additional Super Hornets to help close the shortfall. This request anticipates that the Navy will follow through on its promise to add aircraft next year and beyond. I'm extremely proud to represent the thousands of highly skilled, hardworking men and women in North St. Louis County who build the Super Hornet and many other vital programs that support our brave men and women in uniform. These workers are part of America's absolutely vital national skilled manufacturing base, without which we would be unable to defend freedom both for our homeland and for our allies as well. In St. Louis, we have a long, proud history of providing our military aviators with the finest warplanes ever produced. And generations of my constituents have helped defend freedom by applying their skills to build these aircraft. In his appearance in front of the Senate, Secretary Mavis said that it is imperative to keep this FA-18 manufacturing line open, both to close the Navy's tactical aviation gap and to maintain this vital program for our allies who plan to place additional orders for this exceptionally capable and cost-effective aircraft. This year's budget makes difficult decisions, and your subcommittee has the challenge of looking closely at that spending plan. You have always been responsive to putting the needs of our nation's warfighters first, and I respectfully request that you give favorable consideration to the Navy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Clay, for being with us, and both Mr. Wisloski and all members of the committee are certainly strong advocates of the F-18 and their capabilities. We're also mindful, sometimes more than the Defense Department, that we have an industrial base, and a lot of remarkable people often have worked in that industrial base for many generations. So we need to respect their skills. We can't get them back once we lose them.
And you know, before it was Boeing, it was McDonnell Douglas.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And it's 15,000 workers.
Mr. Wisloski.
Chairman's not that old.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Congressman Dave Reichert from the great state of Washington. Thank you for your Air Force service, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and thanks for holding the hearing and inviting us here today to share our thoughts. I'm here supporting the partnership between the military and law enforcement, having been Air Force and law enforcement for 33 years. Specifically, I'm here to request that no funds be used in the fiscal year 2017 Department of Defense Appropriations legislation to fulfill Executive Order 13688, which is in regard to the 1033 program, the sale or donation of excess property from the Department of Defense to state and local law enforcement. Otherwise known as 1033, as I said, is essential to keeping our communities safe. On January 16, 2015, President Obama issued Executive Order 13688, which created a prohibited list of items to be transferred under 1033 program. This list includes armored track vehicles, 50 caliber firearms, ammunition, bayonets, camouflage, and other items. So I'm going to just take a moment here to speak from my own experience, 33 years with the Sheriff's Office, and we've had occasions to use this equipment. Helicopters, OH-58s, Hueys, which are helicopters that are Vietnam era vintage. We've been able to acquire those helicopters sometimes and put together to make at least one helicopter fly. We've saved lives with those helicopters. Especially the Hueys and search and rescue missions. The OH-58s are used for surveillance. It's still used today for surveillance and other tasks connected with our SWAT team maneuvers and missions. I'll just give you a quick story. You know about San Bernardino, but in the Sheriff's Office, when I was the sheriff in the late 90s, we had a situation where a man killed his wife, killed his nephew, drove south on the freeway, ran over a motorcyclist, nearly killed him, jumped a fence, beat an 80-year-old woman over the head, broke her neck, ran next door, did the same thing to another senior citizen, killed her, broke into a house, and started shooting the neighborhood. Our first responding officer was shot. Bullet went through the windshield, trajectory, flattened the bullet out, hit her in the forehead, went into the headliner of the car, knocked her out, but we thought she was dead. I had 5 officers pinned down, three police cars riddled with bullets. He just happened to find a house that was full of ammunition and guns. So we thought we had a dead officer or a seriously wounded officer laying in the front seat of this police car in front of this house. We used one of those armored vehicles, Mr. Chairman, to rescue that officer. She is alive and working today in the King County Sheriff's Office. Our SWAT team is moved in this vehicle. I was the SWAT commander for 3 years. I used that vehicle in SWAT missions, and it gave us cover and protection. Police departments can't afford this material, can't afford this equipment on their own. There is a very regimented application process for police officers and sheriff's departments across the country to go through in acquiring this equipment. It has to be demilitarized before we use it, and if other requirements are needed, for example, maybe we don't paint them the Army green. Maybe we paint them a dark. They were too militaristic, so we put them in the trunks, and we avoided that problem. There's a lot of things that we can do to make this work, but the last thing, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, the last thing we want to do is to take this equipment away from law enforcement, especially in today's world where terrorism is a threat throughout this country, and we're asking local law enforcement to do more and more and more as it relates to Homeland Security. So I would ask, again, that you please don't provide any funding for the implementation of the President's Executive Order 13688.
Well, thank you for being here, for your service in the Air Force, and obviously your perspective as a longtime sheriff. I very close to a number of sheriffs in my area, and they are very happy to have had the equipment they've been given. They use it responsibly, and I must say I agree with your position, and hopefully that will prevail. Mr. Wiskoski.
I would just say that the last piece of equipment I helped a local community secure was an armored vehicle to ensure if there was a dangerous situation, people would be safe as opposed to using it sensibly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleased to welcome Congressman Buddy Carter, who's been very patient. I apologize for the delay.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate your
Chairman.
being with us. I know you're a strong supporter of national defense. We're glad
Absolutely.
you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member. I appreciate the opportunity to share my concerns and priorities. For the 1st Congressional District of Georgia, as you know, it's an honor for me to represent a district that's home to every branch of the military, and I'm very proud of that. Our district is home to the Naval Submarine Base Kings Bay, the port for the Atlantic Ballistic Missile Submarine Fleet, which will soon reach the end of its life cycle. For this reason, I've submitted a programmatic request in support of the Ohio Replacement Program with the intent to maintain the development timeline. The Virginia-class attack submarine and the Virginia payload module will also continue to play a large role in the nation's submarine fleet through undersea strike capabilities. As such, I'm supporting the President's budget request for the Virginia payload module and the Virginia-class submarines. Similarly, the A-10s have been providing critical close air support for our ground troops since they first entered service in the 1970s. The combination of capabilities and its survivability against defense platforms allows A-10s to continue to play a major role in air campaigns. That's why I'm supporting full funding for the operations of the A-10 fleet. Around the world, commanders have utilized the Joint STARS aircraft for accurate real-time information concerning enemy movements. With these aircrafts being some of the oldest in the fleet, I've submitted a request supporting the President's budget request for the J-STARS platform and urged the committee to ensure the program remains on time and on budget. The Special Operations community has experienced great strain on their readiness due to their operational tempo over the past decade. The Preservation of the Force and Families Initiative is a great program that will ensure our special operators and their families are adequately cared for. So I'm supporting the President's budget for this program as well as requests for Special Operations aviation programs. The Department of Defense has some very successful programs in place that educate today's youth. The STAR-based program and the National Guard's Youth Challenge program have helped to better the lives of thousands of kids across the country. I've visited both of these. I can tell you they're very impressive. For that reason, I'm supporting a funding request consistent with the needs of those programs and planned expansions. Lastly, the Army recently validated a requirement to increase the total number of armored excavators needed for global missions. Those requirements are consistent with changing needs across the combatant commands for machines capable of route clearance and engineering projects. Therefore, I'm submitting a request consistent with the needs of the Army. I appreciate your attention to these matters, and I thank you for the opportunity to share them with you.
I wanted to thank the gentleman from Georgia. Georgia certainly is a critical mass for just about everything. So your strong historic support for national defense covers a wide range of things that I know our committee is deeply committed to.
Thank you.
Mr. Wiskoski.
I appreciate you highlighting the youth programs.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very proud of those.
That's a great program.
It is. Thank you very much.
Mr. Blumenauer and then Mr. Meehan. I want to thank the gentleman from Oregon for being here. I think you're a repeat offender. We're glad to have you back.
Well, I appreciate your courtesy and acknowledge that you have one of the most difficult tasks in Congress.
We Peter Wiskoski, and the entire committee, so
You mean
we
dealing
appreciate
with me?
I won't talk about the dynamic here of the committee leadership, but you are tasked with actually funding national security, which I think is everybody's top priority who serves in Congress. I wanted to reference just a few things. One, I take modest exception to my good friend from Georgia, because I think we need to take a step back and look at what we're doing with nuclear modernization. The spending that we are a trajectory for $1 trillion over the next 30 years for weapons we haven't used in 65 years are far in excess of what we need to deter any nation on earth. Putting money in the pipeline to upgrade all 3 legs of the nuclear triad may look good in terms of the authorizing committee, but you have to deal with the realities of what that means. And that's going to come at the expense of hollowing out our defense responsibilities. I am deeply troubled that we're looking at this next phase of the replacement cruise missile, which is going to be another 20 or 30. The father of the cruise missile, former Secretary of Defense William Perry, feels it's no longer relevant. I mean, it's just one example of something we can get along with without. At the same time, the president's budget slashes the work to try and deal with non-proliferation efforts. I mean, the fastest way that the people who hate us are going to get access to loose news is the stuff that's going on. There's evidence that ISIS actually has some low-grade fission material, and we're cutting back. It's a minuscule amount of money, but it's something that speaks directly to the security of the United States. $1 trillion over 30 years and starving 130 million for something that would make a huge difference to our security. I am likewise want to express my appreciation for the committee's work in the past, pushing back on the effort to try and slide the authorizing committee, trying to create the sea-based deterrence fund, which takes away the responsibility for the Department of the Navy to choose between its various activities and slides it into the Pentagon-wide budget. And the Appropriations Committee, I think, has appropriately pushed back. I know it's not easy. That would be a simple solution, like the Overseas Contingency Fund, which can be a little slush fund. But in the long term, that would be disastrous. And I would hope that in the course of your work that you can at least work with us to try and find out what the actual budgets are going to be for this menu of choices. Somehow that was controversial in past budgets. I think that whether you think that we need to upgrade all our nuclear weapons and spend that $1 trillion, or if you think we have other priorities like protecting the Guard and the Ready Reserve and the Army and the Marines, regardless of where you are in that continuum, wouldn't you want to know what they actually cost? And you can help us with a little pushback on that. Again, I appreciate this is a tough job. I know you've got lots of different competing interests, but the extent to which you can help us have an honest accountability, maybe slide away from some things that we actually don't need and will have a disastrous effect in the future, and be able to have an honest accountability. And last but not least, have those nuclear proliferation, non-proliferation funds. It's rounding error in the budget, but it's critical for the defense of the United States.
Well, we appreciate the gentleman from Oregon's regular, straightforward frankness on a lot of critical issues as we deal with our nuclear obligations, our conventional weapon obligations. We want to do the right things. We need to know how much things cost. I fully agree with you. We do, of course, take a look at the investment on non-proliferation, given what's happening around the world. I know Mr. Visklowski and I feel strongly that's part of our annual obligation. So we are hopefully on our game. I yield to Mr. Visklowski.
Thank you, Chairman, very much. I appreciate you raising the issues, and it's very apropos because both the chairman and I have, we continue to serve on energy and water, as does Mr. Calvert on our committee. It's an accident of fate, but it's very useful because of the NNSA programs and non-proliferation programs that you've talked about. And the chairman and I both serve as chair and ranking on that subcommittee as well, and have struggled with some of these issues because too often the department sends over a letter to DOE and says we need everything because it's not out of their budget. And I share your concern about the proliferation program. So you've come to the right place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pat Meehan, gentleman from Pennsylvania. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for keeping you waiting. And we note the green tie, and I haven't gone to 4 St. Patrick's Day parades over the last 2 weeks. I feel that I'm very much in accord with your heritage. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A green bicycle.
A green bike, yeah.
Earl, I'm ready to ride. We'll go out with the green bikes and the cherry blossoms. It'll really be quite the combination here in Washington, D.C. Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm very grateful for your extending the opportunity for us to with Ranking Member Visklowski and all the diligence that you put into making these very, very difficult decisions and choices. But I'm here today to talk about a very, very important asset to our military, which is the V-22 Osprey, the military aircraft, which has proven itself by its performance, by its flexibility, and by the choice of our warfighters, as it's demonstrated its effectiveness in not only the theaters of war, but also its ability to represent the nation so effectively in responding to catastrophes and things of that nature. So it has proven itself in a very short period of time to be one of the most flexible and important assets that our Marine Corps has. Now, the Osprey is built at the Boeing facility in Ridley Park, Delaware County. It's also co-built in Texas. The important part to realize here is it was purchased under a 5-year contract that Congress authorized in fiscal year 2013. Now, what it did was it signed a multi-year contract that saved taxpayers almost $1 billion by doing the multi-year contract. But when the president signed the 2017 budget request, he unexpectedly reduced the procurement of the Osprey from the agreed-upon 18 to only 16 airframes. And what's going to happen is now we're going to jeopardize the unit cost capacity that was generated by the original contract. It's going to jeopardize the jobs at both Boeing and in Texas, Boeing in my district, and most importantly, it's going to incur additional costs for taxpayers. It's going to deprive our troops of the 2 airframes that have been used so effectively on the battlefields. The Marine Corps has asked for these 2 additional airframes. They were placed in the annual unfunded priorities list, and the arbitrary cut included in the president's budget is just another demonstration of how it doesn't meet the needs of our men and women who are serving our nation in uniform. I have watched as the performance of this has been proven itself, but also the workforce has contributed dramatically to the ability to make these available in the most cost-effective manner. So I ask you continue to the tradition of supporting the V-22 by fully funding the production of the 18 airframes in the fiscal year 2017 budget. The V-22 is working for our troops in the field. Its production is supporting good middle-class jobs, not only in Pennsylvania, but in Texas. I urge you to support it, and I thank you for the consideration.
Well, thank you for your time and for being a strong supporter of national defense. The Osprey is an amazing aircraft, and does provide incredible capability, incredible flexibility, and certainly the Marines are a strong advocate for it. We will do our level best with the dollars that we have within our budget to see what we can do to make sure that we have more of them and that we protect that very important industrial base.
When I talked to Marines from Iraq and Afghanistan, they talked about the flexibility and the ability for them to quickly get up into the air and respond. It also protects them from IEDs. It's a huge benefit. They can get to the source, make an impact, and get back without having to incur any kinds of danger along the way.
Absolutely. Mr. Visclosky?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Meehan. Congressman Mo Brooks, great state of Alabama, thank you for being with us.
Roll Tide. And I should say War Eagle for those folks too. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, Mr. Chairman. I've got written remarks that we've put together, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to read them in order to expedite things and move along quickly.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about an urgent operational need for the Army's 82nd Airborne Division, tasked with the Global Response Force mission, as documented in the division's urgent operational needs statement on March 2014 by the 13th Airborne Corps and now Vice Chief of the Staff of the Army, General Allen. There is a lack of resources available for increasing our enhanced tactical mobility capabilities. Specifically, these requirements were for GRF Infantry Brigade combat teams assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff to counter increased proliferation of the enemy's area denial and anti-access capabilities by conducting airborne assault. The 82nd Airborne Division's unique requirements and its gap in meeting policy directives present a critical and time-sensitive requirement that cannot be delayed while the Army considers a broader program of record. Senior Army leadership continues to validate this urgent need. It is documented in the 2015 United States Army Combat Vehicle Modernization Strategy and identified as an FY15 assessment by the 18 Airborne Corps that lack of infantry brigade combat teams' ground mobility is one of their highest risks. To quote a key paragraph on page 8 from the recently published Army TRADOC Combat Vehicle Modernization Strategy, quote, "The infantry brigade combat team's greatest limitation is its tactical and operational mobility once deployed. This capability shortfall, or gap, is especially critical in joint forcible entry scenarios that rely upon swiftly seizing key terrain or facilities to establish a lodgment for follow-on forces. Because potential adversaries possess A2 area access and AD area denial capabilities that prevent direct seizure of air or seaports, the infantry brigade combat teams must maneuver from greater distance into undefended locations and then maneuver rapidly to seize entry points for follow-on forces. This type of movement requires tactical mobility for infantry squads to move quickly, on or off-road, to attack from multiple directions more swiftly than enemies can respond, end quote. Providing Army airborne, air assault, and light infantry access to deployable off-road mobility that has already been fielded in United States SOF units today is an easy, affordable, low-risk solution. It also serves as a common-sense example to the much-discussed need for DoD acquisition streamlining. In order to fill this need, I authored a House letter to your subcommittee asking for your consideration to fund and field a commercial off-the-shelf technology for 3 battalion task forces, 369 vehicles. Through this funding, we will be able to give critical mobility capabilities to troops with limited options for traveling in rugged off-road combat zones. Again, thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for the opportunity to testify.
Mr. Brooks, thank you for being here, obviously, for your strong support of national defense, and you have Redstone Arsenal in your backyard, which
Yes, sir.
does some remarkable things for the nation. May I say, put in a plug-in for a commercial product is out there. Sometimes the different services are a little different, resistant, but in reality, we need sort of a mixture of our own defense R&D and what the capabilities of the private sector. So appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chris Gibson from the great state of New York, thank you for being here. Thank you for your Army service.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman and the Ranking Member. I want to thank you both for your long and faithful service to our nation and for your tremendous support for our servicemen and women and their families. As a 29-year veteran myself, I remember serving and seeing both of your strong support in terms of legislation and vocal support on the floor, and it's deeply appreciated. I'm here today to talk about a bill that I've introduced, a bipartisan bill that appears to be gaining significant bipartisan support, and I believe it'll have bearing on defense appropriations later this year. It has to do with the strength of our land forces. Land forces as defined by the Army, that's the regular Army, the National Guard, and the Army Reserve, and the United States Marine Corps, active duty Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps Reserve. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, since the time that the decisions were taken to draw down the land forces, there have been a series of developments, and I believe that the assumptions that were made when we made these decisions are no longer valid. We have seen since that decision, and by the way, just for specificity, drawdown is to continue to 2018 and is on course to take our land forces to pre-World War II levels. To take the Army down below 1 million, to take the Marine Corps down significantly as well. And you know, when you look at the assumptions, you know, we have seen the rise of the Islamic State since that time. We have seen an ever more aggressive Russia involved not only in Eastern Europe, but then introducing forces into Syria. We've had concerns about a quixotic North Korea, concerns about China's activities in their desires in terms of the South China Sea and other places, and of course Iran. So you know, with all of that, and when you consider the fact that, in my view, it was debatable even in the first place, some of the what is sometimes called the myths associated with conflict. As somebody who served on the ground in Iraq 4 times, including 3 times after 9/11, those actions were certainly not the cakewalk that some thought that that activities were intended to be. And so I think when you look at the approach that I think we all agree upon, which is one of peace through strength, and the need to assure allies and to deter potential adversaries, nothing would make me happier than if this generation, millennials, would go their whole lifetime without seeing a shot fired in anger. But the history of mankind is such that To be able to make a difference on that, we need a strong defense. And when you look at these assumptions, the changes in that score, I believe that we need to stop the drawdown. That's what our bill does. Myself, Sergeant Major Walls, Tim Walls, Democrat from Minnesota, we have authored this bill. To date, there are 20 Republicans and 6 Democrats on this bill. We are working with leadership in the House Armed Services Committee that this would occur. So essentially, the drawdown would stop, and we would be at slightly above, about 9,000 above pre-9/11 force levels for our land forces. So basically, the 10th of September of 2001, which we think, in view of the entire joint force, will help us assure our allies and deter our potential adversaries. And if that day ever comes, that we need to fight the wars, that we will fight and win. So, of course, the cost is an issue here, and there will be many different perspectives on that score, right? But the one that obviously matters is the Congressional Budget Office, which comes in at $600 million. So we know we have some lifting to do in the Armed Services Committee, but Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, I'm here today, and of course a distinguished panelist as well, who's been involved in intelligence for many years and Defense Appropriations. I'm here today to really raise your situational awareness that I think this is an issue we're going to have to deal with this year, because Mr. Chairman, in the event that we continue on with this drawdown, not only will it take us down to, I think, unacceptable risk levels and to pre-World War II levels, as you know, as you both know, as you all know, it's not like a light switch that we can turn off and turn back on. If we end up reducing the land forces down to these perilous levels, the next president, whoever that may be, will spend their entire first term just trying to get back to where we are at this moment. It'll take 3 to 4 years just to get us back to where we are today. I think that's unacceptable, and that's really why I'm here today, and to stand for any questions that you may have on that.
Well, thank you for your very sobering testimony. I think we're all concerned about end strength, and your recent service in the Army obviously points up the fact that we never know what may happen in the future, but certainly the drawdown is a concern. Thank you for highlighting your bipartisan legislation. I just want to assure you our committee works very closely with Chairman Thornberry and the authorizers, and we'll see what we can do to address some of the issues that I think will have a future impact on our national security. Mr. Wisconsin?
Appreciate the testimony, and we talk about in terms of number of shifts as well as personnel. Personnel are more capable than ever before. Shifts but you need a certain number. And unfortunately, some people think that given the large size of the budget at DOD, it's an infinite amount of money. As you rightfully, it's not. But you gotta make room for the right thing. So I do appreciate your testimony very much.
Yeah, you bet. And just put a finer point on that. And right now, in terms of the time soldiers, servicemen and women are back here in the United States, and before they go forward, that dwell time is still about 1 to a little over 1.5. And if we ever get committed to a major theater war, which again we hope we don't, there'll be no dwell time. And so we're all dealing with as well post-traumatic stress, brain injury, and the impacts of constant rotations overseas. And in view of that, this bill also helps buy down some of that risk by taking care of our servicemen and women.
A brief comment for Mr.
Very
Rose.
quickly, because I know you're behind. First,
Mr.
I agree
Wagner.
with your comment on peace through strength. World history shows that. Secondly, I suggest, and I'll work with you on this, that we deal with the issue of sequestration, because that, in the end, is going to make us weaker and weaker, and it's still out there.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Congresswoman
Thank you.
from Missouri, Ann Wagner, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
You're not late, we're behind, I can assure you. If anybody feels insulted because we didn't get
No.
called upon first,
Well,
off to a late start.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Chairman, and the ranking member who's here also, and other members of the subcommittee. I want to thank you, first of all, for your steadfast commitment to our nation's most pressing national security matters. In that vein, I want to highlight the growing stresses on the demands of the United States Navy tactical aviation. As you know, the ongoing wartime operations against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant has greatly increased the operational tempo of our tactical aircraft. The carrier-based aircraft, the FA-18 Hornets and Super Hornets, have been the backbone of our force projections and engagement. Last year, the Chief of Naval Operations testified that his Navy faced a shortage of operational aircraft. This is commonly referred to as a tactical aviation shortfall. Congress and your committee, Mr. Chairman, led the way in addressing part of this challenge with added aircraft in fiscal year 2016. However, the President has not budgeted to take on the challenge more robustly in this year's budget. Only 2 Super Hornet aircraft were added in the OCO in response to training and operational losses. The fiscal year 2018 budget shows a demand for 14 more aircraft, but there still is potential gap this year. These actions taken to address the tactical aviation shortfall are not enough. This is why the Chief of Naval Operations has provided Congress with an unfunded request for 14 additional Super Hornets above the President's budget. There remains a shortfall of at least 36 Super Hornet aircraft. And given the critical capability that the Super Hornet provides for ongoing wartime operations, any shortfall is dangerous to the Navy's ability to project force throughout the world. This unfunded request helps mitigate that shortfall, anticipating that the Navy will follow through on its promise to add aircraft in next year's budget deliberations. Of added importance, the addition of these Super Hornets keeps a key production line open for capable strike fighter aircraft in St. Louis, which supports some 5,000 local jobs. In years past, your committee have been incredibly responsive to the warfighters' most pressing needs, and the budget and its unfunded request demonstrate how important tactical aviation is to the Navy's mission. The Super Hornet is providing that critical capability today at the most affordable cost. So I ask that you urgently consider the Navy's unfunded request and add the 14 Super Hornets to the President's budget to address the tactical aviation shortfall and the warfighters' needs. And as always, I look forward, Mr. Chairman, to working with you and the ranking member and others on your committee. I have testified before Chairman Thornberry's committee also, and I want to thank you for your consideration of the request. I will have a letter here that I will be sending to you regarding the Navy's request for the 14 additional Super Hornets.
If there's no objection, we'll put it in the record today.
Absolutely. It's to be
consider-
signed by members of the delegation in both Missouri and Illinois, on a bipartisan basis, so.
Well, this is the bipartisan committee, so
Absolutely.
we'll do our best to look at it and consider it. Navy tactical aircraft, pretty important. You should know those, many of those who preceded you put in a good plug for the Super Hornets, and your added emphasis is indeed welcome.
And as an Army mom who has a son who's fighting as a captain and has served in the Middle East, I can't tell you what these kinds of aircraft can do in terms of the capabilities on the front end as the soldiers move forward. So
We thank you for your family's service.
Yes,
It's
thank you.
remarkable.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas, Massachusetts, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. Well, I always enjoy the opportunity to hear other members come and talk about their priorities as well. And thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. It's a pleasure to be here. As a member from Massachusetts, as you know, where we are home to a remarkable military installations, research development facilities, highly innovative private sector, I have long advocated for maintaining the Pentagon's focus on researching, developing, engineering, and producing the best equipment and platforms for our service members. Our state is uniquely positioned to be helpful in that regard, and having just come from an Air Force caucus today, where very much the focus is on maintaining a cutting edge and reinforcing this need. These advancements not only ensure that our men and women in uniform have the most advanced life-saving equipment possible, but they also help maintain America's technological edge over its adversaries. Unfortunately, defense-related RDT&E has faced a disproportionately sharp cut in recent years beyond the mandates of the Budget Control Act, and I'd like to be a strong voice for full funding for defense-wide RDT&E. And in that vein, I'd like to highlight 3 important RDT&E related efforts in this year's budget. First, I want to recognize the work conducted by the Warfighter Technology Directorate, which empowers the United States Army by focusing on improving body armor, eye protection, and other protective systems for our soldiers. I think we've all seen the benefits of those investments. I was discouraged to see that the fiscal year 17 President's budget decreased funding for the Directorate by almost $2 million as compared to the previous fiscal year, and I would ask that the committee direct an additional $5 million above the President's budget. Second, I'd like to offer my support for the President's budget request for the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System, or JSTARS recap program. As many on the committee know, the legacy JSTARS platform has provided unparalleled joint air command and control capabilities for over 2 decades, but the program is badly in need of modernization, and I would request full funding in this year's Defense Appropriations bill. Third, I would like to commend the Department of Defense for expanding the Defense Innovation Unit experimental concept to the East Coast, and for its plan to open a DIUX extension in the Boston area this June. Doing so will enable the department to collaborate more extensively with leading industry partners and world-class universities in the greater Boston area. And in that vein, I support full funding in the President's budget for both the RDT&E and O&M funding lines to bring DIUX to Boston. Next, I would ask that the committee provide the department with full funding for the DoD Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office at the level requested in the President's budget. Every service member deserves to know that the department will not tolerate any form of sexual assault or harassment, and I ask that the SAPRO office be fully funded. It's been an important investment that the DoD has made, and I think has progress to show for it. Additionally, I'd like to advocate for $25 million in funding for the department's STAR-based program that provides STEM-based educational programs to some of the most socioeconomically disadvantaged and underrepresented students across the country. The program seeks to educate the next generation of scientists, mathematicians, and engineers in our country, and is worthy of our support. And I certainly hear from across all boards the shortage in those fields, and we'd like to see our more disadvantaged students introduced to those fields and encouraged to enter them. Finally, I respectfully request that you include not less than $25 million for the recruitment and retention of women in the Afghanistan National Security Forces and the recruitment and training of female security personnel. As a large body of research has demonstrated, meaningful inclusion of women in security forces can vastly enhance their operational effectiveness, and I would ask for your support. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Well, thank you for being a strong supporter of national defense, and certainly as we give money to Afghanistan, we need to make sure that we empower women to be part of the solution. Otherwise, we're not going to have a solution. And may I say, the committee has hammered home the whole issue of sexual assault, totally unacceptable in any part of the military. I just want you sure that the money we put in there has obviously strong bipartisan acknowledgement and support. We're not going to tolerate that type of behavior. And I've always viewed Massachusetts, maybe this is old-fashioned, as being the miracle mile. And so you do a lot of things for national defense. I think the Northeast needs to be part of that equation. We want everyone looking after national defense, but the Northeast plays its role, and Massachusetts has a very special place as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your recognition of that.
Briefly, I would point out that the chairman 2 weeks ago brought up the issue of sexual misconduct, harassment with the Department of the Army, as well as others, so he's very cognizant of it. Appreciate that you mentioned the Afghan National Security Forces and women's role. Mr. Moran, when he was on the subcommittee, was a very strong advocate, and appreciate you raising that today. While you are here, I know Mr. Kennedy is going to talk about the WIN-T program. I see you want to put in a good word as well.
I'm happy to do that, but we'll work with my
Thank you.
colleague, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you for
very
being here.
much.
We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
The reference to Congressman Joe Kennedy from the great state of Massachusetts. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And let me just say what an amazing job Congressman Tsongas does on this committee and has for years for Massachusetts and our companies, and most importantly, employees in Massachusetts that continue to contribute to our national defense. Grateful for her leadership and her work and her tremendous support for the WIN-T program. Also want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Fiskowski, for your help and support and guidance as I've come to Congress to try to navigate some of these issues, and very much appreciate your friendship with that. I appreciate all of your unwavering commitment to the national security and for your continued oversight for the Department of Defense. As our nation's soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen defend a nation and her citizens, this subcommittee works day and night to ensure that they are safer and more prepared than ever before. My testimony today will focus on the importance of a critical modernization program for the U.S. Army called the Warfighter Information Network Tactical, also known as a WIN-T, and why it's critical that we increase the funding for the program for the fiscal year 2017 budget. WIN-T provides soldiers with secure voice, video, and data where there is no existing communications infrastructure. Carrying the Army's Battle Command, Intelligence and Operations Communications, the WIN-T program is the Army's cornerstone mission command program. The WIN-T Increment 2 program builds on the capabilities of Increment 1 by making that mission command mobile. In June of 2015, after years of rigorous testing, the Department of Defense approved WIN-T Increment 2 for full rate production. More importantly, the system has deployed in combat with the 101st Airborne and the 10th Mountain Division and earned positive reviews for its innovative capability and unwavering reliability. As our men and women in uniform arrived in West Africa to confront a deadly Ebola virus, the system provided crucial coordination and seamless communication to the United States. Whether they are fighting our enemies, protecting our homeland, or addressing a global health crisis, our duty in Congress is to ensure that our soldiers are ready and equipped for any circumstance or challenge. The WIN-T Increment 2 does exactly that. Despite its proven success and importance of the program, the Army's fiscal year 2017 budget request reflects a drastic reduction in funding. As recently as the 2016 budget request, the Army had planned to spend $417 million on the WIN-T Increment 2 in fiscal year 2017. Yet the request for fiscal year 2017 is down to $292 million, a troubling low for the program. The Army's fiscal year 2017 request would procure only 2 division sets of WIN-T Increment 2 capability. The Army hopes to bring this program to a total of 106 units, but at this point, it has only delivered it to 14 brigades and 6 divisions. Based on the request at this funding level, it will take the Army 2 or 3 decades to provide WIN-T Increment 2 across the Army. We cannot wait that long to give our service members the tools they need as they put their lives on the line to protect us. Today, I'm requesting the increase of $114 million for WIN-T Increment 2, an amount that will allow the Army to procure 2 additional full brigade sets of the program. This would simply maintain current funding levels. The low fiscal year 2017 budget would also cause significant disruptions in the WIN-T production base and impact several suppliers across my district and my state. The subcommittee has strongly supported the WIN-T Increment 2 program in the past. Fiscal year 2017 request for this program is insufficient and adversely impacts soldier readiness. I strongly urge you to add the $114 million to the WIN-T Increment 2 program. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, thank you very much for allowing me to testify on behalf of a program that I believe will make a difference for our troops in times of war and peace.
I want to thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for being with us this morning, being a strong advocate for WIN-T. I think communications are pretty essential. Obviously, we need to get it right, and we'll be working very closely with you, and Mr. Visklosky and I will be working with you and other members to make sure that in the final analysis, this program has the means to do whatever it needs to do for our military.
I appreciate your timely request because we will be on a fast track, and appreciate your persistent about the request, and you're committed to it. Appreciate it very much.
That. It's important to the military, it's important to our district. So grateful for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
both.
I guess we want to thank everybody who came, and Mr. Visklosky in particular. And so we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
You know, if I had gotten here